one thing strings the crammed and messy dorm rooms and the first-class restaurants of Trend together. One food. Only a creation so innovative, so delicious, and so perfect could supersede societal expectations and food classes alike. Only one food can sustain the apocalypses of the present and of the future and satisfy them all. Instant ramen. What's inside of those cups of nostalgic goodness is a mystery to most of us, but its flavor is known and loved worldwide. But how has it affected modern America? How do we have such a connection to it? And will its convenience reign supreme for time to come?
Welcome to Spoonable Standpoint, the podcast where your hosts Leo and Charlene dig into food culture. In this episode, we'll be discussing how instant ramen has impacted American culture and cuisine, as well as our lives. How has instant ramen changed how Americans perceive convenience? What's the future for such a seemingly perfect food? But first, how did it come to be?
The man who created instant noodles, then later instant ramen, was one of the most interesting food pioneers. He didn't invent instant noodles early in his life and ride on this success. Instead, Momofuku Ando, the creator and founder of cup noodles and top ramen, didn't develop instant noodles until he was almost 50. The inventor of the Japanese creation was born in Taiwan in 1910 as Wu Baifu, then moved to Japan after World War II and changed his name to Momofuku Ando.
He was already well into adulthood at this point and worked jobs like selling socks and textiles, making salt, and even starting a school at one point. In other words, jobs that had nothing to do with making ramen. Plus, he had gone to jail in 1948 for tax evasion due to the aforementioned school, so he was far from a ramen maker.
This is the part of the story where lines were blurred between the corporate origin story and the actual story. Momofuku Ando's origin story goes as such. He was walking in Osaka and came across masses of people huddled around a stand. As he got closer to them, he realized that it was a ramen stand, which was when his genius idea supposedly struck him. He realized that everyone loved ramen and that the people of this world needed more food, so he put two and two together and figured that the key to solving hunger in the world was to make easy-to-make and cheap noodles.
The problems arising from whether or not this is true is not the story, that may have happened, but the timeline in which it happened and its original price. He said that his realization happened in post-war Japan, and the company he founded, Nissin, didn't become a company until 1958, well after post-war Japan. In addition to that, the first instant ramen the company made, called chicken ramen, was much more expensive than regular noodles, but their unbeatable convenience was able to win over consumers. Flash frying noodles as if it were tempura gave them the ability to be boiled quickly and ready to eat. Just as the iconic chicken ramen grew in popularity exponentially, Nissin released a product that would change the way we ate instant ramen forever: cup noodles. It was inspired by people who reused coffee cups as ramen bowls. Because of this, Nissin removed an additional step out of the equation of preparing this already revolutionary dish. Unsurprisingly, this even more convenient invention took over by storm.
But how did instant ramen become so popular? The answer is likely what you thought: convenience. In the 50s and 60s, there was a surplus of crops in Japan, and the economy was going back up from its demise at the end of World War II. This meant that, more than ever, people were going back to work full-time and didn't necessarily have the time to make and eat something delicious, as many great recipes took a long time to make. Instant noodles and instant ramen were the answer. Anyone who even smelled it knows that it was obviously delicious, and even though it was more expensive than noodles, it was extremely convenient.
In a time of bustling, having something filling ready in minutes was groundbreaking. So much so that within the first year of chicken ramen on shelves in Japan, Nissin sold 13 million packages. Later, when cup noodles came out, it was just as big of a hit. And now, cupped instant ramen is more popular than loose instant ramen. In America, Top Ramen was released in 1972, a year after cup noodles in Japan. It was an instant success, no pun intended. It was advertised heavily and widely popular, so much so that some thought that instant ramen was Japan's most popular export in front of TVs.
Recently, ramen noodles have taken on a new purpose compared to what they had for the past few decades. With the ever-growing rise of social media, it has become extremely popular for some foodies to find new and, shall we say, experimental ways to prepare instant ramen, like ramen burgers where the bread is replaced with instant ramen still in their rectangular shape. But in the end, those may just be ways to gain followers and likes on social media or maybe make your small business go viral. But many other restaurants are deciding to elevate instant ramen beyond its sodium-ridden deliciousness. New and creative ways of using instant ramen have become popularized beyond its convenience to become true high-level cuisine.
Instant ramen is a strange food because it's popular in both high cuisine and in everyday energy consumption. Mofuku Ando's vision for instant ramen was an end to hunger through something affordable, cheaply produced, and filling. If it can exist in all levels of cuisine, then he has done just that. In March of 1997, Ando started the World Instant Noodle Association, first called the International Ramen Manufacturers Association before a name change. His association had the vision to bring instant ramen to those who need rations in order to survive after a major disaster and to find new ways to highlight food safety. His vision for instant ramen has carried out throughout the generations into what it is today, an extremely popular food all around the world. But has instant ramen created a divide in how we perceive food quality in America? When instant ramen was first introduced in the 1970s, it was introduced at the perfect time for it to have been so popular. Just because from the 50s and even until today, convenience was and still is key. My mom said that when she was growing up, her mom would, even though she was an amazing cook, she would always use stuff from a can or a box. Like if she would make green beans, it was never she would go out get fresh ones, maybe once in a while for like Thanksgiving or Christmas or something. Most of the time it was just take a can of green beans, put it in a pot and boil it, and then you're good. Now it seems a little bit weird, but back then it was the norm to do it because that was considered the height of food quality. It was amazing to have something so easy to make. But that's kind of what instant ramen is now. It's just something that you could probably make much better, but that takes more time and it's not as convenient. And I think because of that trickery that instant ramen plays, it does create a divide in how we perceive food quality. Because we link something so delicious to something so cheap. And because it's so cheap, you aren't expecting much. You aren't expecting it to be like a 3 Michelin star bowl of ramen. You're expecting it to be fine. Anything for 70 cents, you're not expecting it to be the greatest thing. And that's why I think that instant ramen really does and really has changed how we look at cheap food. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I mean, I definitely think it's a good thing because there's actually a psychological phenomenon where people equate higher prices to better quality. And a lot of the time, it's not the case. So now that you can have something cheap and pretty good, it's definitely worth the money. Adding on to what you were saying before about the convenience, combining that with how cheap and easy it is to make, it really is one of the most perfect foods that one can eat if they're in a time crunch or even if they just don't feel like making anything. On top of that, instant ramen is also used a lot in times of crisis like natural disasters and especially during the recent pandemic. Global demand definitely increased with a spike at 2020 because of this. And in the US, an increase of about 420 million servings of instant ramen was observed. But back to what we were talking about before, because of its convenience and simplicity, there are so many opportunities for you to make it a little bit more interesting. I know many people who just take the noodles themselves and make their own soup and add, vegetables, an egg maybe, meats, and anything else. So you could really transform this really simple sort of base meal into something completely different and much more healthy and delicious.
Yeah, and its convenience is it's so enlightening. I didn't have instant ramen growing up all that much. I don't know why. I think it was just because my mom was just like, I don't think you'll like it. Or maybe she was like, it's too unhealthy. I don't want you to eat it. But I was probably about like 11 or 12 when I first had it. And it's one of those things where you're like, you make it and then you eat it and you're like, wow, this is so good. How is this only like 70 cents? I remember, even though I didn't finish the bowl because I got either the taste got boring or I just got too full, I was always like, I want some more instant ramen again. 'Cause it's such an addictive flavor. I think that's also why it got so popular. Like, most foods that get popular are not just because they're convenient or whatever. They're because they taste good. And instant ramen 100% tastes good. And I know for me, it did taste good. But as I was saying before, I didn't finish the bowl, and I still don't finish the bowl. Just because the flavor gets really boring, at least for me, after a little bit. I don't really have like a sensitive stomach or anything, but I don't know. Whenever I eat it, I always get a stomach ache because I think my body thinks that I'm eating a lot, but there are no nutrients in the instant ramen, so I don't feel fulfilled energy-wise. Plus, the high sodium is never really something that I've liked, but the first like 10 bites really just like draws you in. You're like, this is probably the best thing I'll ever have, and that's how I started to like it.
I find it pretty interesting how you wouldn't finish the entire bowl because, I mean, in the end, there really isn't that much nutritional value and there isn't really much to fill you up. But I don't know, in my experience, I really liked it. I didn't have it much as a kid because, like you, my parents didn't really want me to have much of it because it was so unhealthy. But when I had the chance to be able to eat it, even making it was fun for me, even though it was just pouring water and just letting it sit. I don't know, it was just the experience. And of course the flavor too was really, really good. I loved the flavor and I would finish it every single time. Most of the time it was just cup ramen. However, during the pandemic, we definitely tried a lot more instant ramen because we weren't eating out as much and a lot of us didn't have time to cook because we were occupied with work and stuff. So we were able to try quite a lot of instant ramen varieties. And let me just say, some of them are actually really good. I know I was saying how good cup noodles were, but a lot of these are like things I'd probably be able to find in a restaurant. I mean, I know there are some restaurants that do use instant noodles, but no shame because they are good. But a lot of them are actually pretty high quality meals that you could make in a short amount of time and not for much money. Of course they aren't, 70 cents like some of like the Maruchan flavors you can find in pretty much anywhere. I'd used to add vegetables and eggs and other flavorings. Once you have that, it's just altogether a really great meal that at one point I'd even have like once or twice a week.
Going back to what you said about restaurants serving them. I remember I was at a restaurant once and they had this ramen and I was like, are they saying that's instant ramen? And it was just so weird, but it really is such like a very particular flavor, but it's such a well-liked flavor. I don't know why. To be honest, it's probably the sodium. But if you have a product that exceeds like food culture, but you can also get it at a supermarket for a handful of cents, then you've definitely made a really good product. And instant ramen is definitely one of those things that is kind of the future of cuisine. Like when we think of the future cuisine, at least for me, I think of, like when we're in space, what will the kind of food be? Freeze-dried fruit, all that kind of stuff. But instant ramen is really one of those things that will be on every spacecraft because all you need is water, and they never expire. They probably will expire, but not for another like billion years when the universe is over or whatever. But that's what makes instant ramen, at least for me, really great. So what could be the future of ramen? I know for me, I think it's just getting a lot more healthy. It's definitely not something that you eat and you go, all right, I think I deserve a cheat day. That was a good diet. But if they get healthier, I think it might attract more people. It might bring the cost up, just because having things that are filled with sodium is really cheap, I should say. But being able to make it healthier definitely will attract a lot more parents, because maybe they're like, okay, this has some nutritional value. Maybe it's easy to make, it's pretty cheap. Okay, I'll get it just to try it. But then again, if the price goes up, it's gonna scare away a lot of people who like that it's so cheap. It's a dangerous balance between, do I make this better for you, or do I keep it at a quality where it's pretty good for the price?
Going back to a little thing you said before about ramen in space, they were actually the first noodles ever eaten in space, which it completely makes sense to me because of how versatile and easy they are to store, even here on Earth. But for the future, I don't think that really cheap instant ramen is going anywhere. And neither do I think the more trendy and expensive ones are. Ramen kind of hits that sweet spot with the customer audience because it has cultural presence, convenience, customizability, and is cheap. I can't really go a day without, scrolling through some food pictures on Instagram without seeing a delicious bowl of ramen. But at the same time, I'm also seeing so many memes and things like that about instant ramen, like how, college students eat it all the time, and even that meme of using instant ramen and sanding it down to fix sinks and stuff.
And it's really incredible how instant ramen has such a spread worldwide. It seems like such a specific cuisine that it wouldn't really take off everywhere. It would only take off in a small region or even one continent. But it's everywhere. 103 billion servings of instant noodles are eaten annually in the entire world, which is just a mind-blowing number. Instant ramen, instant noodles, whatever you want to call it, it's obviously not going away anytime soon. Especially because, as we keep saying, it's incredibly cheap. A few cents, stuff that's a few cents and tastes pretty decent is not going anywhere. Fast food is not a few cents, but it's cheap, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Especially in America. America loves its convenient food. Maybe that's a byproduct of how we were raised to think by parents and grandparents who grew up in a time where convenience was the height of food quality. But to me, it's incredibly interesting that instant ramen is so popular, especially worldwide.
I know many of us in America are definitely very happy to be able to experience something as good as instant ramen. And Japanese people are actually really proud of bringing this across the world. In a survey conducted by the Fuji Research Institute, the results said that Japanese people are actually the proudest of being the country that invented instant ramen. And in Japan, there's an entire museum dedicated to it. There's a whole spa dedicated to the process of cooking ramen, brown colored water to imitate soup. And this I can completely understand. You can see it all over the world. And because of the nature of this dish, I have no doubt that it'll continue to be as popular or even grow to be even more popular than it is today.
I fully agree. There's just a few things about instant ramen that I think should be changed soon if it wants to continue growing as is now. Now, people, especially in America, love things that are healthier. And things that are healthier become extremely trendy and just insanely popular. The instant ramen at trendy restaurants it's probably pretty healthy. Even though it's instant ramen, it's not necessarily like, they don't just give you like a thing of cup noodles and go, okay, well, thank you for coming to our fancy French restaurant. They spice it up. They make it healthier so it seems more appealing. So that's how I think it needs to evolve in order for it to continue, because it's extremely processed. It's high in sodium. It has like no fiber, no protein, or any necessary vitamins. And if you eat it a lot, it can lead to heart problems. But then again, you can spice it up yourself. So it's this weird dilemma where it's like, people are like, oh, it's unhealthy. But then companies are like, I guess you could just buy it, but then like spice it up and make it more healthy. It's 70 cents. What are you expecting it to be like? So I think it's very in the air, but I'm not necessarily complaining. It's delicious.
So, what is the future of instant ramen? Progress defines most food evolution, but for instant ramen, how it is now might just be how it always will be. Although it might not be healthy, it's affordable, filling, and tastes pretty good. So why change? But does that keep instant ramen in a standstill? Will we ever get bored of the feeling it gives us? Perhaps we won't, because, to quote Momofuku Ando himself, mankind is noodle kind.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Spoonable Standpoint. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at spoonable_standpoint for our latest updates, link to our website, and other bonus content. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it. We release a new episode every other Friday, and we hope to see you there.